Hello and welcome to the Booster Pack. My name is Rance, and this is the show where we unwrap the stories and crack the mysteries of collectible games each and every episode. And I don't think that logline has ever been so relevant for a show, because today we are going to be unearthing some clues and hearing some testimony about some of the most mystery-filled collectible card games to ever hit game store shelves. Now, to help us amateur gumshoes solve the cases that confront us today, we are joined by an expert witness, one that was tirelessly working in the games industry from the late 1990s and into the very early 2000s. There were a playtester, a convention liaison, and of course, a game designer as well, where they even had a chance to co-design their very own collectible card game. Now, that collectible card game, it was not any old regular collectible card game. In fact, it was actually adapted from the classic adventures of the world's most famous gang of meddling kids. Yes, that's right. I'm sure that last little clue there has given it away. So without further ado, allow me to unmask and introduce our totally groovy guest for the show today. Welcome to the Booster Pack, Scooby-Doo Expandable Card Game co-designer, Brian Woodward. Brian, how are you?
All right, doing great. Thank you. I love that intro.
So let's get started. Let's find out a lot about yourself and the games you worked on, because it was not just Scooby-Doo. As you can see from your t-shirt, there's a couple of others as well. So before we get to the game specifically, why don't you tell us about about how you sort of got into the gaming sort of side of things, and then also tell us about your first experience with collectible games.
Well, with in gaming in particular, I'm one of those kids that was lucky that their parents, bought them D&D when I was a kid for Christmas, and that got me started on RPGs. And of course, in high school, all that stuff. And then, I was still gaming, but everything was put on pause. I was in the military. I went in the military for 8 years. I was in the Air Force. And as soon as I got out, a buddy of mine and I wanted to start playtesting and stuff like that with card games. And, I had heard about, this game, what was it called? Magic in the Garden, Magic the Gathering. Yeah, that's it. My friends were really into it. And I was like, well, it's a thing, but when all of a sudden they combined it, Next Games had combined it with football and baseball, which I was a big sports fan. So Red Zone and Top of the Order. And I started playing those and really getting into those games. And, I played a little bit of Magic, but I was never, big into it. My friends were more collectors. And so we saw something in one of the trade magazines about Next Games wanting to do get play testers for their games. So we're like, oh, hey, this is great. So we can play test these two games that we like. Well, we got on the phone with them, and it ends up that they wanted to play test for this brand new game that they just got the license for with Don Russ for a show called the X-Files.
Oh, wow. That must have been exciting to hear.
And I almost jumped through the roof. So I was just a X-Files fanatic. I just loved the show. I had been watching it since the first episode. And when they asked me, to be a playtester in X-Files, I was like, yes. That's where I got started with the industry anyway, was playtesting the first iteration of the X-Files. They sent these little tiny white cardboard cards that had printed on what they wanted to do. And, we had to sign the non-disclosures and all that. And I started on there. And then I'm hoping I'm not rushing into all this, but we went from there to when they decided to premiere it at Gen Con, the game. We were invited to, basically to be the booth monkeys, showing people how to play the game.
Right. So you guys were demoing and doing that convention liaison thing.
While we were there, my buddy Dave was talking to one of the industry people there and trying to get himself a job.
Right. Yep. Networking.
And I was just, bright lights, big stars looking around, and
Had you ever been to Gen Con before?
had never been to Gen Con, Milwaukee, and all that stuff. And so it was just, so much stuff to do, so much to see, walk the venue, get to see all and get to talk to people from all the different places.
Well, yeah.
So just meeting people in the industry and meeting other people that were interested in gaming and writing and stuff like that. But I wasn't thinking of it as going forward looking for another job, but Dave was. So what ended up happening is Dave did get a job with them, working on the X-Files in Cincinnati with USPC. X-Files was originally, the license was by Don Russ, the car company, and then USPC bought it from them and went forward when he did all the printing, of course, and all that stuff. So when Dave was there, he got me to come out. And originally, I was just kind of helping out in the office. I wasn't getting paid or anything. And one of the human resources person there said, "You can't just come in and work for free." And I said, "Well, if you want to pay me," they were just trying to say you can't come anymore. But it ended up they needed help with emails and snail mail and the forums and all that stuff. And I already had a big background in the game, being a playtester from day one. So they hired me as an independent contractor, and that's what I did. I worked for on the X-Files in Cincinnati as an independent contractor, working on the website, answering questions on the forum, answering questions and doing mail, emails, all that stuff.
So let's jump back to that early playtesting you mentioned way back a bit ago. With that playtesting, were you was the game that you were playtesting essentially very much like what we ended up seeing? Was it very much like the agents going to locations trying to solve what your opponent's card is, with that sort of like almost clue-like sort of feeling to it?
Kind of. There were a lot of differences in the initial one. One of the ones in that a group was talking about recently is that there was like another area. So right now in the game, there's the bureau that's where the agents start. They go out to a site to do an investigation, and then there's the hospital. But there also was going to be an area where they would do the actual take the clues and everything,
like a forensics lab.
Yeah. And then you'll see even on some of the cards, some of the keywords and stuff like that don't actually match up with anything. There'll be a keyword on the site, and what's supposed to happen is the different investigators or the witnesses or whatever, the bluffs, are supposed to match up with them. Some of those keywords on the sites don't match up with anything because that part was taken out of the game.
So it's almost like this phantom limb of like what had existed before.
Yeah, so they had some of that investigation stuff, but there was a lot more to the combat. There was a lot. I mean, it was more of there was a lot more of the fighting between the adversary and the agents initially. And they kind of backed off a little bit on that. And then how the resources were spent on how to buy your cards and stuff like that changed.
Was that based on some of the feedback that maybe you guys were giving as playtesters at that time? Or was that something that was changing internally? Like, do you know any reasons why that was changing?
Some of it was because of 1013. So Chris Carter, they wanted the investigation part of it, I think, and not as much of the combat, what I understood. And there were some things that when you're working with a property like that that's on TV, you have to have, I guess, certain rules or certain things that can and can't be shown. Yet they have to have, the fan base, right? The fan base want to be able to. They don't want to have anger somebody in the fan base by having something that's too controversial or whatever.
You've got to continue upholding the brand and sort of make sure everything is familiar to what has been established before, right?
Exactly. And so a lot of that changed on that. Now, some of the rules and stuff did change because of our input. I mean, they had armor that they wear, that people wore and stuff like that, as in like a leather jacket or something, and some of that stuff never made it through.
Thus does the beast of playtesting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so let's jump back to where you're back inside of the company. So you're doing to put it in no other short terms, odd jobs around, USPCC. What's going on then? That's while they're still developing more sets for X-Files. This is while X-Files is sort of in market.
Yeah, they had that. They did that first edition that came out that was not collated at all. You could get a deck other than the banded section. You can get a deck that was just all sites, which was unplayable.
That's so interesting, because I assume that they were using the same printers they were using for playing cards. So perhaps they never told them to randomize them properly, right?
Well, see, that's my question, because they actually had printed Magic.
Yes, that's true.
So they knew how to do CCGs. I don't know where the breakdown was. I don't know what happened. They had the banded, like I said, they had banded sections that were, your 4 investigators, and then, the basic things that you would need to play. But everything else that was in the boxes was done poorly. And then they made it so that people figured out you could cherry pick the ultra rares out of the booster boxes, because what they did is they printed all of them, and then the ones that had the ultra rares, they did on a separate print run, and those packages were packaged separately. So all the packages for that, most of them were, you can see there was like a larger silver lining on the back of that booster pack that you could see from the wrap. And so people were going through there, and then of course when stores figured that out, they said, no, you can't, dig through the box.
They went from the countertop to behind the counter then.
Exactly. Yeah. So they on the first edition they did, and it's amazing that they did so much wrong on when they knew how to do stuff. I mean, I don't know what happened. I really don't. I've we've talked and discussed with other people. We don't know what happened. So when they did the blue cards, and that's mainly where I think I was involved at the company more, is that got collated correctly, and then they reprinted a lot of the cards from the first set so that people would be able to see them.
Mm-hmm. That's the Truth Is Out There expansion or whatever. Is that what you mean?
Was that called The Truth Is Out There? You're probably right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, the blue. In my mind, it's the green edition, the blue edition, and the blue.
No, I bought into the marketing.
So they did that, and then we did have some input a little bit on the cards still coming through, and then it was more interesting because we got to see how the decisions were made for the pictures on the cards and stuff like that, which as playtesters we didn't have the input on, right? And like one of Dave's favorite stories is they wanted to do a card. I think it was just called Holy Symbol, and it was a close-up of the cross around Scully's neck, and that went through 7 iterations, going back and forth, because at first they didn't want to have a card that had a cross on it, and then there was other things, and then it came back, and then on the last iteration it went back to the original picture, and that's the one that got published.
That's work by committee by the sounds of it.
Exactly. And so we did that, and I was so I still did have input on stuff and input on rules, especially because I was answering the questions on the forums. So when someone said, you know, if I play this card and X happens, you know, what's supposed to go on here? And then I would actually give the answers. I mean, I didn't do it, you know, all alone. I would talk to the guys in the office about it, but I mean, that was the, you know, the final say on what went on to the site and what these answers were.
So you were basically helping sort of shape and like game design, or, you know, do a final design on this game's rule set in a way.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So tell me from your inside perspective there, obviously, you know, you're familiar with what's happening. X-Files sort of goes through, it has that second, you know, more better collated sort of base set sort of thing. And then there's another expansion that comes out after that. And then there's a sort of a very famous sort of advertised expansion that sort of disappeared before it sort of came out. Do you know what was sort of happening with the X-Files CCG? Like, was it something that was sort of, was there a reason it sort of went out of production with something expected to come down the pipeline in the very near future at that point?
Well, what ended up happening is it was really successful, and it was actually selling very well. A couple things. One, USPC was doing 90% of maybe the casino cards worldwide at that point in time. I think they were getting ready to just buy Hoyle. They were buying playing cards, and they were buying Hoyle. And they saw money in all of that, and they didn't see money in CCGs. You know, it wasn't making as much. It was making a lot and making more than most, but it wasn't making casino money, right? That's number one. Number two, what actually happened, and it's so long ago, I don't think it makes a difference for me to say anything. A board member got into an argument with either Fox or 1013, probably Fox, and made an idiot out of themselves, basically. And Fox said, "We're done with you," and pulled the license. Said, "We're not going to work with you anymore." And that person ended up getting knocked off the board like a month or two later. But that's what happened, is that we had a popular game that was selling well. We had another expansion. We had all these ideas. We had, you know, these special pewter cards that were supposed to be made, and you know, gift sets that were being worked on. You know, these Upper Deck, right, was making these special deck sets.
Like gift sets or something?
Yeah, for the gift sets. And then it all just, it went under. It just, that fast. And so what ended up happening, not only, I mean, they pulled it, we did our last show, they pulled that license and everything was disappearing. And then the people that were left, when everything came crashing down, wanted to try to bring it back, maybe make a more basic version of the game and be able to sell it in the big box stores like a Walmart or a Target, where you know, USPC had a big presence with, you know, the bicycle playing cards and B and all that stuff. So after that person was gone from the company, they decided to try to redo everything and asked me as the contractor to write a new rule set. So I wrote the rules to X-Files, not completely, but made an easier basic version of the game to be sold. And Fox was not having any of it. They were already done with USPC at that point. Whatever was said, burned the bridge and turned it to ash, and there was no way it was going to be rebuilt again. So that was the end. I still have some of the mock-ups of things that I did and basic card looks and stuff like that. Some new card ideas. I wanted to add some humor into the game, so I had some cards made up that had some of the humorous, not just humorous pictures from the episodes, but some of the humorous stuff that happened. I mean, This Is Not Happening is a famous card, which is the alien smoking a cigarette. It's the gray alien costume. But it's not played for laughs. And I wanted to, have a little bit of that in there, maybe for the younger audience. I was hoping.
Well, that would have been so interesting as well. Like you said, if there's this, well, first of all, there's a couple of things I want to pull out there. First of all, in the humorous thing, that would have been about 97, 98. That's about the time that Magic started doing their humorous sets as well. So it would have been interesting to see that alongside it. Like you said, there was basic rules, so it'd be more accessible to a younger audience if it was in mass market. I mean, who knows if those younger audiences were old enough to stay up and watch X-Files at the 9 o'clock time slot or whatever it was back in the day. But that's sort of fascinating as well. And this is actually not the first game I've heard about that sort of fell by the wayside in the 90s, not because the game wasn't performing well, but because there was some sort of internal trouble or licensing issue or something like that. Obviously, these games were doing a lot better, but because they looked like they got canceled and, there was stock left everywhere or went to bargain bins or anything like that, the stigma of these collectible card games being bad was sort of like left hanging over them, when clearly that was not the case.
No, and actually it's getting kind of a resurgence a little bit now. There's some forums and there's people making a large amount of fan cards, for the game. And they actually, some people just ran a tournament recently, an online tournament.
Yep.
It's out there again. People are playing.
It's out there.
It's out there. Yeah, exactly.
Well, the truth was, it was always good, I think. And I love that that's happening in a lot of old collectible card game communities at the moment. People are finding each other through Discord and Facebook groups and stuff like that. And be sure, if you're watching this, I will link, if you haven't already found them, the Facebook for X-Files and some other great X-Files CCG resources that you can use to follow up the game nowadays. But sorry, Brian, back to you. I think it's absolutely fascinating what people are doing. And like I said, I've seen you interview with some other enthusiasts and stuff for the X-Files game nowadays. This resurgence is great. People are rediscovering it, things that they loved the show back at the time. They might have collected the cards and have no one to play with. And the best part about all this is now you don't need somebody sitting across from you to play it. We've figured out through Zoom calls, or we've figured out through Tabletop Simulator, that we can play with people across the world. So it doesn't matter how big these communities are, as long as there's somebody else, there's always a play group.
And not just in your own country. That's one of the other best parts of it, is some of these places, they didn't get to try it out. I actually saw someone posted recently, he translated a bunch of the cards into French so that his pals can play the game with them, because they weren't really into it because they didn't know English very well. Well, now he's got a set of French cards that he mocked up, and I guess they're having fun with it. So, I mean, that's great. It's everywhere.
That's awesome. So, well, before we move on from what happened from X-Files, we learn about, how it ended up coming to an end. Just before we did you do any specific card by card design for the game at all? Or were you still just working sort of in that sort of auxiliary capacity when X-Files was being published?
I think I had ideas, but they had enough designers. I mean, they had the main guys from X Games were still working on it, and they had the other guys that were working there. Not until the stuff that I was doing for the rewrite. That was the only time I actually had actual cards designed by me, made, or or mocked up or whatever. But of course, no one ever got to see those. So,
well, in that case, as we know, that might have been the only official CCG that was published under, United States Playing Card Company. But something happens after that, something that actually leads to a collectible card game that you get to create yourself. Tell me about what Journeyman Press was and how that came about.
Well, with Journeyman Press, Dave May, my buddy that I playtested originally with in California, was still with the company. They kept him. He was one of the people that was working on the disposition of what was left of their stock of X-Files cards and paraphernalia, whatever they had. And then he started working on something called USPC Kids, and started to do kids games. And so he had input with people there and said, we really need to try this CCG thing again. You have all these great licenses, because you see what Bicycle prints. I mean, they have everything in the world is printed on Bicycle playing cards, right? So he persuaded them with this idea of Journeyman Press. And so January 1st, 2000, Journeyman Press became a thing. Dave, as the main manager, me being hired as the assistant manager and project manager. And then, went down the line, got people in the different positions that we needed filled in there, and had an idea of games, what we wanted to do. We wanted to be the future in games. And we knew that, unlike a lot of game companies, because we weren't a separate company, we were still a piece of USPC, that we actually had a little bit more money in the background than other people would, because USPC was this huge gaming company, right? So we started that, and one of the first licenses, they wanted to do more with Warner Brothers, and they thought, if we do this with Warner Brothers, maybe they'll want to do more with us later on. So Scooby-Doo was one of the first things that came up in that conversation. I raised my hand. I said, yeah, I want that. I'll do Scooby-Doo, and I had already written this basics rule set that was like the X-Files, that was for kids. And so, I actually was able to use that and then, change it for the genre that I was in. But I mean, it was still an investigation game, right? It's still, and you still have Mystery Incorporated instead of Mulder and Scully, so we did that. And unfortunately, the one person you're not gonna be able to talk to is my co-creator, Todd Breitenstein, passed away several years ago.
I saw that he passed away, and it was sad that was the case. But yeah, please tell us about how you and him worked together to create the Scooby-Doo game.
So what ended up happening is Dave and I, knowing each other for so long, had an interesting working relationship. Before our offices, they actually were making some offices just for us in the company. We were like on a floor with some advertising people, and Dave's and I, our discussions about rules and stuff for Scooby-Doo got heated, let's say.
As discussions about rules between friends do.
Yes, exactly. But that's how we worked together, right? And it wasn't that we would, and later on, we would play a game or eat lunch together or whatever. It wasn't that, but because it sounded really bad to the other people that were on the floor that weren't part of Journeyman Press, because they thought, why is this guy talking to this other guy like that?
Yeah, they thought there was a HR problem going on in the other room.
Yeah. So Todd stepped in. He wanted to work on Scooby-Doo also, wanted to work, with it, and said, how about this? I'll work with Brian. We'll work on the rules and the cards and everything together. And then when the discussion has to go to Dave, the manager, Todd will go talk to the manager. And then there won't be this loud discussions that are bothering the rest of the people on the floor. So that's how it started. And then it ended up, we did a lot of the rules, and it ended up with Todd and I sitting on the couch in the office watching Scooby-Doo, because we had to, and pulling cards out of there. The Scooby-Doo CCG was the first game that, and the only game, as far as I know, still to this day that they did for Scooby-Doo that actually has frames from the cartoon.
The original, like, Where Are You cartoon.
Yeah, exactly, from the original cartoon, from the first series. And I mean, they sent us videos for all the original series.
So this is before DVDs and the internet and all that sort of stuff. This is, you could only get these things basically from Warner Brothers.
Right. So we would pause, and there would be a picture in like Shaggy's mouth wouldn't even be drawn on, and we're like, oh, we had a card idea for that. So Shaggy has no mouth or something like that, and they didn't care.
So just to give it context, obviously he had no mouth because that was just a cheap production thing. Like it didn't need to be in that frame, so you guys could find it. Like, you know, Hanna-Barbera or whatever was probably only putting it on every second or third frame, and it looked normal on television. But when you slow it down, you can find these little anomalies. That's hilarious. And you made cards out of them.
And we made cards out of them. They have what they call it is it was 1.5 frames. And so they had one full frame and then a half frame. And the half frame would have all the stuff that was missing on it. And they let us use all that stuff out of there. They were great. There was barely any cards that they said no to. And we would give them several ideas for pictures for a card. And most of the time they just took the first one that we chose. And we got this thing, they started calling it fast track. And they actually put us on a fast track for stuff going through them because they didn't have any problems with what we were doing. They saw that we were faithful to the license. We loved the brand, and we were doing something that people would like. So they fast tracked a lot of the stuff through.
That's amazing. So there's a few things that I just learned so much then. There's a few things I really want to point out. So as you mentioned, Journeyman Press, founded in 2000 after your friend Dave May had been bugging, USPC to sort of reopen the CCG, vault of sorts and start working at it again. Obviously, that was in the wake of things like Pokemon. So, you've got things like a perfect kids franchise like Scooby-Doo that felt at the time pretty much timeless. Even though this was a 1969 cartoon, you guys were creating a game that was still relevant to kids that day. It's really fascinating to hear. The other thing as well is that you guys were able to work with Warner Brothers in such an easy capacity. And as Scooby-Doo was sort of building up as well, like I'm fascinated that we didn't see more from that collectible card game. Like, tell me before we get into like why we didn't see more of it, tell me about the actual process of designing it a little bit. Like, you said that it's such a fascinating piece of CCG history trivia that the X-Files collectible card game is taken to become the Scooby-Doo card game in a way. Like, it's very similar sort of ways. You've got agents, which is Mystery Incorporated. You've got different sites, which is, crime scenes or whatever it's called in that game. I thought that was fantastic. Tell me about translating that sort of heavy material that you see in X-Files to the light, fluffy, psychedelic era stuff that we see in Scooby-Doo.
One of the things we were looking at is like, okay, what can we do? So equipment, for instance, we had cell phones, or I think, and there's an X-Files card that's a cadaver, has a clue or something. And we were like, okay, well, they do use stuff in there. They use props, and Scooby-Doo always can pull a prop out of somewhere because cartoon characters can pull props from anywhere, right? And they would use those. So we're like, okay, so these different items could be used to help the people with their, like, instead of adversaries, we would have the monster, the pirate's ghost, or the fair's robot or whatever, and they were scary. They weren't there to be in X-Files, they're there to kill you or to whatever. In Scooby-Doo, they just scare you. So things have a level. It's just how scary is, and how can they make the kids run away and not investigate that area, and because it's too scary for them. And that worked perfect. That translated perfectly.
Yeah, well, it sort of sounds like, in a way, in a roundabout way, got to add that sense of humor to the X-Files card game, like much later on. You got to add that same sense of humor you were looking to add with the basic rules, the 4-kid element, but with this new franchise on top of it. And I'm sure, I mean, I'm being presumptuous, but I'm guessing by what I assume your age is, you probably grew up with Scooby-Doo as well.
Yes, I did grow up with Scooby-Doo. I mean, I wasn't, I was, I was 2 years old when it first came out, but I mean, I did grow up with later on. I was a huge fan. And I think, and I'm pretty sure Todd was too. And like I said, we sat there, we would watch the cartoons. We had all the scripts, the original scripts from the series. They sent those over to us too, so we could follow along with what's being said.
Well, I'm so impressed with how much effort, you guys and everybody put into it. Like, a lot of people, I think, look at those sort of, less well-known CCGs from that era and don't realize how much love went into them, whether there were people who actually loved those franchises and went through meticulously and actually thought about it. Something mechanically that really strikes me about Scooby-Doo is that there's a lot of cards that, and you mentioned it before, that reference other cards and stuff. So it's sort of fun to play, two decks against each other. One card can cancel another card, and it has sort of like a more storytelling sort of feel to it. That was obviously very intentional and something you don't really see as much in, say, X-Files.
Right. We wanted a lot of that story in there. And that's the one thing again with the locations. So we would take an episode and we would all the items from that episode would work with each other basically. So if they used a flashlight, if they used I'm trying to think of what some of the things, Scooby snacks or something like that would come into the game. The mystery machine, if the mystery machine needed to be used, whatever it was, we wanted to make sure that those things worked with each other within there. And then the locations, you had the main one, the other ones had to build off of that. You had the main location, the other ones had to build off. You had to have cards that work with each other, actually able to do that. And so that all worked really well. I was actually in our 2 promos that I know that they got printed, but I don't know if they ever got distributed anywhere. I was surprised that not only that Warner Brothers didn't care, but that USPC let us do. We had 2 cards that did absolutely nothing in the game except delete each other. It's quick, make like a bird, and quick, make like a beaver. The text on quick, make like a bird is that it cancels out quick, like make like a beaver. And that's all those 2 cards do.
Well, I love the fact that you chose for those to be promotional cards, because if people didn't end up getting them, it wasn't a big issue.
Right. Yeah, it was a promo. It was something we were supposed to give out at the conventions.
They sound like a lot of fun for sure. That's great. So was there, other than X-Files, obviously you based a lot of your Scooby-Doo ECG. Let's actually talk about that for a second. Expandable card game, which actually means something different nowadays if you say it in the sort of modern parlance. But back then it was basically interchangeable for collectible card game or trading card game. Why were the Journeyman press games, because I believe Age of Empires as well used this moniker, why did they go under the expandable card game moniker rather than the traditional collectible card game or more kid-friendly trading card game name?
Because of the WotC.
The patent on trading card games?
Yeah. They sent that to us when we were working on the X-Files. And USPC just looked at it and But we didn't want to mess with that. We didn't want to so one of the people that was really the vice president that was in charge of our section of Journeyman Press was a lawyer. I think that's where ECG came from. That wasn't something that came from the guys that made the game. That came from the company.
It was just to avoid any sort of entanglements from that very opaque sort of patent that was passed way back when. So my question, I guess, originally was going to be, obviously X-Files is a huge influence on what the Scooby-Doo CCG became, but was there any other collectible card games or anything else in that sort of similar space that influenced the way that you approach the Scooby-Doo ECG, I guess?
Maybe just individual cards. We did. I mean, we had from X-Files, we had our own version. I can't remember the name of the card now in Scooby-Doo, but we had our own version to Deny Everything, which is, one of the big cards still to this day for X-Files, where it basically restarts the game. Our version makes you reshuffle the clue deck and start over. And then we had, in one of your previous podcasts, you were talking, I don't remember who it was I was talking about, but you were talking about the fun cards that Garfield wanted to have in Magic. And one of them was like one of the ones that, you would flip or you would drop.
Chaos Orb?
Yeah, we made a card like that on purpose as a promo card because we wanted, this was the original. They were the original. We wanted to, give props.
An homage of sorts.
Homage, exactly, an homage.
And I think that was Iron Maiden, right? Iron Maiden is a Scooby-Doo card that you can flip it up in the air.
Exactly, Iron Maiden. So we did different cards like that. So that influenced maybe designs on cards and other games we were seeing. But rules-wise, for myself anyway, not really, because a lot of the games anyway, the CCGs I was playing were combat related. Like one of the big ones I played, and of course I'm fuzzy on years when different things came out, but I was really big into L5R. Yeah, so Dave and I were both played that, and even Magic, it had a big combat kind of element to it, and we wanted to make something that didn't have that. Now I'm sure there may have been some other ones in the years after Magic that were, didn't have fighting and stuff in it. There probably were, but they weren't on my radar as much. Now, you can go back and look at one and say, well, what about this game? And I might say, okay, yeah, maybe. But on top of my head, I can't think of any rules in particular other than, just our evolution of the original X-Files card game.
And like you said, there was a bunch of cards in the X-Files game that was inspired by, those old fun sort of, Arabian Nights and early Magic cards that did sort of crazy things. Alien Harvester was the version in X-Files of Chaos Orb and stuff like that, I think. But yeah, it's so fascinating to see. And I love seeing those connections between games and the way that they influenced each other, especially in those early years. Now, you mentioned it sort of before, like the idea was, let's get Scooby-Doo and then let's pursue other Warner Brothers properties. Warner Brothers at the time, and mostly still is, has some of the biggest property or IPs in the world. So what other sort of things started, like, what was it like working with Warner Brothers firstly? And like, what other sort of things did you guys start talking about once Scooby-Doo was in the market?
Well, like I said, Warner Brothers was really great to work with because, well, at least for that property, for Scooby-Doo, we went through and we were able to get stuff through quickly. They let us have fun with the game, have fun with the property, and we worked with DC Comics for that the Rules comic book that they came out with, because DC Warner Brothers.
Well, and that, for anybody who doesn't know, is almost like it's like a 9 or 10 page comic book where two sort of antagonists are playing the game and then telling the story of what's happening in the game. It's actually really cool to see. And I'll actually post a link in the description to a website that still has it posted so people can see it. But as you were saying, yeah, it's really cool to see that comic book.
And so DC was great with us too, because their parent company liked us, so they did. And when we went to the different conventions and stuff like that, we kind of partnered with them a little bit. With the they knew who we were, and there was a Scooby-Doo comic book the person that was the artist that was working on the comic book at that time is the one that did our comic book, our advertisement comic book. And we went to, and this is getting a little away from what you were talking about, but we went to E3, and we spoke to people from all different industries that had been working on different Scooby-Doo type stuff to work with them. So Kid Rhino for the music, I'm terminating the gaming, the computer game company. I can't think of their name right now, but we talked to these different people to cross advertise. Advertise our product, we'll advertise your product in the tray, in the comic books or whatever. DC we had ads in the DC comic books for the Scooby-Doo card game, to get the word out there. Scooby-Doo card game listed in the Scooby-Doo comic book, right? It's perfect, right? And that's the best advertisement you can get. And we wanted to do superhero stuff. Well, and we wanted to do the next iteration of Scooby-Doo, which was called the new Scooby-Doo Movie. It was the ones that came out in 1972. The problem with those is that the contracts they had at that time period. So back then, when they had the Globetrotters and
the guest stars, yeah.
Their contracts weren't made to allow them to use their property later on for something like a card game. So we couldn't use any of those except, they had ones that had Batman and Robin in it, and that was, they owned that, so we could do that. And then, any properties like that they actually owned. And then we're like, well, what other stuff? So I actually started working on, and I don't think I mentioned this to you before. I started working on Powerpuff Girls game. We actually still have the videos and the scripts and stuff that they sent me to work on a Powerpuff Girls CCG.
Wow. Okay. And what was that like? And that was something that you guys were planning to create as well, alongside releasing with Scooby-Doo. Tell me about what you had planned for that.
Yeah, after Scooby-Doo, well, it was just going to be a basic kind of fighting kind of game, with the different characters that were in there. Almost. I'm trying to remember what the rules was. This was a long time ago, and I don't actually have the rules anymore. I just have like the videos and stuff. The rules that I made are still locked up in a safe somewhere at USPC, I guess, or in a trash heap. So I'm not sure. I don't remember. Some reason the Brawl keeps coming into my mind. The James Ernest game.
Right. Okay.
Because I remember one of the other properties we were looking at was Harry Potter. This is before the movie came out. Warner Brothers. It was the Warner Brothers was the one that was coming out with the movie. So we said we want to work on that. We would love to work on that, and do that as a CCG. And they said, okay, well, Hasbro owns the right to most of the toys and games and stuff like that they're going to do. So whatever you do has to be different from what they do. And we're like, okay, we can do that. We'll make something that they're not going to make. So they flew me out to Warner Brothers. So I went to Burbank. I got to go to the little headquarters where all the Cartoon Network and whatever all the different cartoon stuff was. They had like a museum of all the toys and games and stuff of the different properties. And they sat me in a little room with the Harry Potter script and a notepad, which they had to look at before I left to make sure that I didn't write the whole script down and then sell it later to somebody. and pictures and of the characters and the props from the movie. And he said, okay, here. And so I sat in a room and read the script, and saw the parts that were taken out of that weren't in the movie but were in the book. Because I had already read the book beforehand to get an idea. And this is supposed to be based on the movie property. And we really thought that this was something we were going to do. Well, I mean, there's always USPC only wanted to do so much investing. They were happy with slapping the King of Spades with a Harry Potter picture on it on a bicycle deck, but to actually have to buy a gaming license and then compete with Hasbro.
Yeah, which was Wizards of the Coast at the time, of course, which eventually released, the Harry Potter TCG.
Right. And so, unfortunately, there's no way to prove any of this, but we were interested in games, not just CCGs. We were interested in other games, and so we had to submit our product ideas or whatever to Warner Brothers to make sure that it didn't step on the toes of Hasbro. Well, I mean, I guess we would have some of the same ideas. I mean, it's not out there that we wouldn't, but it's interesting that some of the stuff that I designed came out almost perfect the same way by Hasbro on the toy shelf.
It's one of those things, right? I mean, you can't say one way or another, depending on who gets involved then, right?
Exactly. So, so we ended up not being able to do that, and we were putting feelers out everywhere. So one of the other properties we were looking at was not only for a CCG but for an RPG was Farscape.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
And then of course a card that we actually had we made a mock-up of. We wanted to work with Microsoft, and originally we wanted to do something with Crimson Skies, and we actually had a mock-up of a couple cards. It was based on Dave and I played the miniatures game a lot, so we knew how the game worked inside and out, and we saw the potential to make this into a CCG. So we brought that to them. That ended up getting nixed, but that's when they offered us Age of Empires.
Wow. Okay, so that's how that came along.
Yeah. So we said, oh, okay, let's do Age of Empires. So that ended up. I mean, Dave worked a lot on that, but also that was Ted Treble and Marcus D'Amelia are the designers, were the main designers for that. And they actually needed an artist for that. So Jonathan Queen, who's like, big artist in Cincinnati now, was the artist that did a lot of the Age of Empires. Well, I think probably almost 100% of the art on the Age of Empires card.
So that'll sort of bring us back around. Like, I do want to jump back to Scooby-Doo as well. Like, obviously, as you said, they shut that down. But at the same time, while they're in the middle of that, you guys were planning all these other games, but also Scooby-Doo was in the market. So let's discuss that. Like, so Scooby-Doo, like, that had not just the base set that you guys created, but also a follow-up expansion, and then went nowhere as well. Were you guys planning on doing anything after that second follow-up expansion, or anything when you guys got told that Journeyman Press was getting shut down?
Yeah, well, we actually had the idea of, like I said, we wanted to do the Scooby-Doo movies. We would just have to do stuff, make sure we pulled scenes that didn't have those actors.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. So you could work around those other likeness rights.
Exactly. And then that's why we ended up doing the new movie that came out. And we thought, well, this would be actually a great idea. Every year, they come out with a new Scooby-Doo movie around Halloween. So actually an expansion based on that movie, good advertisement for them, good advertisement for us. And that was actually a way in the future plan, was to do something like that. So the Alien Invaders was the first expansion for the game. It sold maybe 10% of what the original sold.
That does lead me to a question. Like you mentioned before, obviously, you guys had the game design, you guys had borrowed sort of from X-Files a little bit, and you had the advertising, and you said it didn't get out there. Was like, did you guys, if I don't remember, like it wasn't really in like Walmarts and Targets, but that was obviously somewhere that USPC was. Was there a reason that we didn't see it in like all the major toy stores and everything like that?
Well, that's actually where it was supposed to be originally. That there actually was a license with Walmart to have the Scooby-Doo on the shelf. And I mean, there was actually special hangers for, they have like, I think a couple of booster packs in one thing to hang on the hook there at the Walmart store. And that was another where someone else in the company outside of Journeyman Press, whoever's in charge of talking to Walmart, did something that upset somebody or whatever, and that fell through. So we had all this product printed up for Scooby-Doo that was made to go on the shelves at Walmart and Target and stuff like that, and no place to go.
It sounds like it's another one of those perfect examples of a classic IP CCG that was not let down by sales, was not let down by game design, but was let down by the juggernaut of the company that was behind it. It couldn't get traction because it wasn't given the right opportunity because of some boardroom decision or some mismanagement in some way. It really, really is disappointing to hear. And again, it's one of those things that because of that, the game is seen by the public, obviously, as oh, it mustn't be a very good game because it couldn't survive in this competitive market. But that obviously isn't quite as true.
Right. And it's hard, it's even more difficult to find than X-Files. With X-Files, there was a fan of the game and of the property that went in and bought, excuse me, sorry, a lot of the product after the fact. After the game died, they went in and bought pallets of cards and T-shirts and everything else and kept the game alive, kept the product alive. Well, that didn't happen with Scooby-Doo. They got rid of everybody that was interested and loved it. As far as I know, it went into a landfill or a crusher or whatever, and most of that product was turned to dust. So there's not a lot of Scooby-Doo product out there even for people that would be.
Right. It is an absolute shame that didn't catch on, because like you said, it was in the wake of Pokemon. It was the perfect time for the market to sort of see it. So, and that sort of brings us to the end of like where you were with Journeyman Press. It was a shame to sort of see that it get wrapped up like that and everything like that as well. Is there any other final thoughts you had on either your term working on X-Files or Scooby-Doo or anything like that?
I just loved being able to meet the people in the industry. One of the things that you find with the card games, I mean, I know there's big conglomerates now, right? And there's people that are trying to make the fast millionaire, but down on the ground, the people, the actual designers, the people that you've been interviewing, these are the people that love the game, love games in period, love playing them. And it was just for the 5 years, I think, total that I may have been in the industry. It was just a great time. It was a great group of people. I got to meet a lot of fantastic people. I wish I had kept in touch with most of them. After the whole debacle with Journeyman Press, I kind of I dropped off the map. It burned me out. It did. So
right.
And it was amazing that I was able to work with such large companies and have a good time with them. I was really surprised that I was able to, talk to people at DC Comics and Warner Brothers and about games and about their properties and they listened with interest. As someone that I was working with on an equal time.
Yeah, so it's amazing that you actually get a chance to experience some of those properties professionally and stuff like that. It's amazing. Now, regular watchers of this show will know that there is one thing left to do before I let you go today, and it's been a fantastic time talking to you, but I couldn't let you go without the last segment of the show, Kraken Questions.
Release the Kraken.
So, Brian, this game, all you got to do is these are some silly questions that we end out every interview with. You tell us which color booster pack you'd like me to crack open. Each one contains 4 extra questions for the interview. 3 are silly, common questions that could just be anything off the wall, and 1 is a rare game designer related question. So you tell me what color you'd like, and we'll send out you the episode with these.
Well, we'll have to go with blue. That's my favorite color.
Perfect. All right, blue it is. So, blue, I think this is maybe the 3rd time we've had blue in a row. Let's see what this particular blue pack has got. So let's see. All right, what do we got? All right, which do you prefer? Poker or chess?
Oh, I'm gonna have to say chess. I'm horrible at poker. I'm not that great at chess, but I like the strategy better.
I think I used to be chess. I think I'm into poker now. I like that sort of social element and stuff as well. But I think it's a hard choice to make sometimes.
People you did an interview with, I lost a lot of money to. He knows who he is.
All right. Maybe you can win it back one day. So question number 2 for Kraken Questions. It is, what movie have you seen the most?
That's difficult. There's a couple that I watch a lot of. One is one of my go-tos is the Lord of the Rings movie. I have the extended trilogy. I have all the, so that those movies are one of my go-tos. The other one I've watched a lot is a movie called The Natural with Robert Redford.
Yeah, Robert Redford, the baseball movie.
Yeah, so most probably, yeah.
All right, so question number 3. If you could magically be proficient at an Olympic sport, what sport would you want to be proficient at?
Pole vault.
Oh, it's so much fun. It looks like so much fun, right?
It does, and just be able to fly like that and get up, be up that high. I wouldn't be able to get a foot off the ground, let alone whatever those people do.
Oh man, I think I agree with you. I hadn't thought about pole vault before, but I mean that fun snapping feeling. It's sort of like bungee jump meets high jump, everything. I love that one.
Exactly.
All right, so your last game design question, and this comes down to a couple of games that you sort of worked in and around. In your experience of working on them, what was the most challenging thing about working on a collectible card game?
Working with other people.
That's the secret, isn't it?
Yeah, really, we're working with licenses. I mean, I know I said it was easy, easy with Warner Brothers, but I mean, it was the opposite. When we went with the Fox property, it was difficult. It was, and that's why we didn't get some of those other ones, because of the things that the people wanted, so we just didn't get those other properties. So I would say the licensees, if you're gonna do a product, make it your own. That's what I say.
I mean, I agree, but at the same time, I think that this episode I would like the people to take away from is at least a lot of those, like especially the licensed ones, those collectible card games of the 90s, a lot of the times they didn't fall by the wayside because they were poorly designed or they were bad games or anything like that. They fell by the wayside because the licenses expired or something like that. Just because there was a 2-set game out for, whether it's Scooby-Doo or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something like that, doesn't mean it was a bad game. Give it a go, pick it up if you can, because by all means, there's a great game hiding in it. I think that's a great lesson to take away from our episode today with you, Brian.
I agree. I mean, the other games that we played at that time period, we played the Decipher Star Wars, right? We played who was the original Lord of the Rings holder?
Oh, well, that was Iron Crown or ICE.
Well, that was for the RPG, for the CCG.
Yeah, they did the Middle Earth CCG, the one that with the paintings, and then there was the Decipher one that was the TCG.
Okay, all right, yeah. So the Iron Crown. So it's the same thing. I mean, I really enjoyed playing those games, and I got into that stuff. But licensing, I mean, that Star Wars license, that's crazy, right? I mean,
I think I've done a count before. I think Star Wars is up to what I would consider collectible card games. I think it's up to like 7 or 8 different attempts now. And I'm sure we'll see another one in the near future.
Yeah, it's the licenses, but you're right. There are so many games out there. I want people to go back. You know, if you can find Scooby-Doo, go back, play it with your friends, play with your kids, X-Files, or any of those other ones. I mean, I still have my Pokemon cards, my original L5R cards. You know, I have all that stuff. You know, I've going back and picking that up and playing again.
Absolutely. And even like, obviously you can find these games, you know, sometimes they're sold online and stuff like that as well. There are websites more and more that are coming up that if it's not something that you want to invest in or something like that, or it is really hard to find, there's websites that have started scanning a lot of these card collections and making high quality copies of each card. So you can always like print and play just to try out the mechanics and stuff like that. It's definitely something that I feel like is so valuable because these games had so much value. And I love revisiting, whether it's with cards originally, whether it's proxies, or even it's just proxying the hard cards to get and stuff like that. These games are so rich. I feel like that sometimes they are too easily forgotten.
And if you are interested in it, and not just in playing, but maybe in making your own card game, it's good to look at the history. It's good to look at how those mechanics work that time period, and how people built on top of each other from one card game to the next. That's why I'm really happy that you're doing this, and I found your podcast. I mean, that, you know, in the future, that we're going to see quite a bit more and some more people on here talking about this.
Well, I cannot wait to talk to more of those and learn about more of those influences. You know, we talked about how Chaos Orb influenced not one, but 2 different cards from 2 separate games that you were involved with. So it's amazing to see this historical resonance throughout time, these homages that these games play to each other. And I'm sure that's going to continue to the future as more and more collectible card games go forth. And as anybody who's watching this in sort of the modern day 2022 will know that we're going through sort of a resurgence of collectible card games at the time, brought on by things like COVID and everything like that. There is going to be bound to be more of these stories. You know, maybe there's a designer out there who played 10 games of Scooby-Doo back when he was a kid and is working on something that, you know, brings it to the modern day. I can't wait to see what we get in the future. So that's about it for this episode of the Booster Pack. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye from me. Goodbye from you, Brian.
Goodbye. I hope everybody's well, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. And that's about it. So until next time, remember, keep shuffling. And there you have it, the mystery solved about the X-Files CCG and the Scooby-Doo Expandable Card Game with their co-designer, Brian Woodward. Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing those stories. And thank you guys for watching and listening to this episode. Now, as Brian and I mentioned in the episode, there are a couple of resources where you can find people who want to play the X-Files CCG still. I will link those in the description below. That is both the Facebook page, and I'm also going to link, there's a YouTube channel that I love. It's called MMXFILESCCG. I'm going to link them in the description. They have a ton of fun videos about the history of the X-Files CCG and the revival that they're trying to get going for it. I recommend you check them out. Now, speaking of reviving old collectible games or even engaging with them, you can also find Category 1 games linked in the description. Now, if you want to collect or get into a collection of any of these old out-of-print collectible card games, look no further than Category 1 games, because they have a bunch of competitive market pricing. They have a ton of games as well. So you can easily either start a collection or bolster a collection that you already have going. I strongly recommend you check them out. Again, they're linked in the description. As for me, I've been Rands, and this has been the Booster Pack. If you want to support the show, the most valuable thing you can do is simply subscribe on whatever platform you watch this on, whether that's YouTube or Stitcher or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, comment, leave a review, whatever you can do to engage with this episode really helps bring more episodes to you as well. Now, me personally, you can find me on social media under CCG History. That's either on Twitter, which is twitter.com/CCG History. I'm very active on there. Or on Facebook, I'm slightly less active, but it is facebook.com/CCG History. Now, the other things you can do if you want to engage with me as well, you can send me an email if you have any stories or info you want to let me know. That is theboosterpack at ccghistory.com, or you'll even find it linked in the description, a special listener survey that you can do and let us know what you have enjoyed about the show, what you want to hear about on the show, or any sort of suggestions you have for the show, whether that's even a topic to talk about, a CCG you want to hear about, a creator you want to hear from. Let us know, and we will try and do our best to bring you an episode all about that. All right, that's it from me. I appreciate you guys joining me on this brand new set of the Booster Pack. If you're a long-time watcher of the show on YouTube, you'll notice that things have changed. If you're listening to this only on podcast, I might have a bit of a different room tone or sound a bit different in my voice. Of course, that is because we have changed sets and stuff like that. Again, if you want to let me know what you think about that, let me know in the comments, send me an email, whatever. I am very happy with it, but I would love to hear what you think. All right, that's it from me. Thank you so much. Until the next episode of the Booster Pack, remember, I've said it once, I'll say it again, keep shuffling.
This is what DC sent me.
Oh wow, that's the book. I read that this week.
A full page version of it instead of the one week that was like a little mini thing, and this is a full version. And then the artists, the people that worked on it, signed it. He drew a little Scooby-Doo on here, and they signed it and everything to me, and sent this out after we worked on the comic for it.